The morning sun filtered through my apartment window as I rushed around, gathering my things for another early day at Meridian Luxury Holdings. As a junior acquisition specialist for one of the world's premier auction houses, I lived in a constant state of organized chaos, surrounded by catalogs, authentication documents, and occasionally, priceless artifacts that needed to be transported between our various facilities. Today was different, though. Today, I was finally going to return the Evangeline necklace to our main vault. The piece had been in my temporary custody for 3 weeks, while our insurance company completed their updated appraisal. It was a stunning Art Deco creation from 1925, platinum setting, 47 flawless diamonds, and a 12-carat sapphire centerpiece that seemed to hold entire galaxies within its depths. The insurance company had just valued it at $1.2 million, up from the $800,000 we'd paid for it at a private estate sale. I kept it in an innocuous jewelry box on my dresser, hidden in plain sight. The irony wasn't lost on me that one of the most valuable pieces I'd ever handled looked, to the untrained eye, like costume jewelry. The platinum had an aged patina, and the Art Deco styling wasn't flashy by today's standards. My friends often joked that I had terrible taste in accessories, not knowing they were looking at a piece that could buy a house. My phone buzzed as I was double-checking the necklace's position in its velvet-lined case. "Hey, sis, huge favor?" It was Marcus, my younger brother by 3 years. We'd always been close, but since our parents' divorce 5 years ago, I'd become something of a protective figure in his life. "What's up?" I asked, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder as I closed the jewelry box. "I know this is last minute, but I have a date tonight with Sarah. You remember Sarah from my marketing class? Anyway, she's incredible, and I really want to impress her. We're going to this fancy restaurant downtown, and I just realized I have literally nothing to give her. Like, not even flowers because everywhere's closed and I'm broke until payday." I glanced at my watch. I was already running late. "Marcus, what are you asking exactly?" "Do you have any jewelry I could borrow? Just something simple, elegant? You always have nice pieces. I know it sounds stupid, but I thought if I could surprise her with something small, just as a gesture." My heart melted a little. Marcus had been through a rough patch since dropping out of college last year. He'd finally gotten his life together, found a job, and was going back to school part-time. This Sarah girl seemed to have brought out the best in him. "I don't really have much that's appropriate for—" I stopped, looking at the jewelry box. Then I had what seemed like a brilliant idea at the time. The necklace was going back to the vault today anyway. Marcus wouldn't know its value, and it would certainly make an impression. Plus, it would be like letting a masterpiece see the light of day one last time before being locked away. Actually, wait. I have something that might work. I opened the box and lifted out the Evangeline necklace. In the morning light, it looked almost ethereal. "I have this vintage piece. It's not worth much, but it's elegant and unique. Very old-fashioned romantic." "Really? Maya, you're a lifesaver. I promise I'll take perfect care of it. Just be careful with it, okay? It has sentimental value." The lie came easily. I told myself it wasn't really a lie. The piece did have value, just not the kind I was implying. "Of course. I'll pick it up after work. Around 5? I'll leave it with Mrs. Henderson. Our elderly neighbor had keys to both our apartments and often helped us out. Just tell her you're getting the jewelry box from my dresser. You're the best sister in the world. I owe you big time." After he hung up, I sat there for a moment, second-guessing myself. But then I imagined Marcus's face when he presented Sarah with something truly beautiful, even if she'd never know its true worth. Sometimes the best gifts were the ones that looked modest but carried deeper meaning. I left the jewelry box with Mrs. Henderson along with explicit instructions to give it to Marcus and no one else, then headed to work with a smile on my face, pleased with my good deed. The day flew by in a blur of client meetings and authentication sessions. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Detective Rachel Morrison from the NYPD. Ms. Patel, this is Detective Morrison. I'm calling about an incident involving your brother, Marcus Patel. My blood ran cold. What kind of incident? Is he hurt? He's not injured, but he's currently in custody. There was an incident at Chez Laurent restaurant earlier today. He's been charged with attempted fraud and possession of stolen goods. The words didn't compute. I'm sorry, what? There must be some mistake. Ma'am, your brother attempted to give a woman what he claimed was a family heirloom necklace. When she had it appraised by a friend who works in jewelry, just out of curiosity, it was identified as a piece that matches the description of a necklace reported stolen from Meridian Luxury Holdings 3 weeks ago. The world tilted sideways. Oh my God. Ma'am, do you know anything about this necklace? I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. 3 weeks ago. That's when I'd taken the Evangeline necklace into my custody. Someone at the company had reported it stolen? Ma'am? I need to come down there. Don't let him say anything else. I'm coming right now. I hung up and immediately called my supervisor, Janet Whitmore. She answered on the first ring. Janet, there's been a horrible mistake. The Evangeline necklace. Someone reported it stolen. There was a long pause. Maya, we need to talk. Can you come to my office immediately? Janet, I have the necklace. Well, I had it. It's been in my apartment for 3 weeks for the insurance appraisal. You know this. Maya, I need you to come in right now. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Janet and 2 people I didn't recognize, a man in an expensive suit and a woman with a tablet who was clearly taking notes. Maya, Janet began, her voice strangely formal. This is James Crawford from our legal department and Lisa Chen from internal security. We need to discuss the Evangeline necklace. Janet, I don't understand what's happening. You assigned me to keep the necklace during the insurance appraisal. I have all the documentation. It's been in my apartment, completely secure, and I was planning to return it to the vault today. James Crawford leaned forward. Ms. Patel, according to our records, the Evangeline necklace was returned to the vault 3 weeks ago, the day after it was taken for appraisal. It's been in our secure storage since then. That's impossible. But even as I said it, a horrible realization was dawning. Can you check the vault right now? Lisa Chen nodded to Janet, who made a phone call. 5 agonizing minutes later, she hung up. The necklace is in the vault, Maya. It's been there for 3 weeks. The room started spinning. Then what? What did I give to my brother? Crawford's expression was granite. That's exactly what we need to find out. Ms. Patel, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Security will escort you out, and will need you to surrender any company property in your possession. But I barely heard him. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was devastating. 3 weeks ago, I'd worked late to prepare the insurance documentation for the Evangeline necklace. I'd been alone in the authentication lab with access to both the real necklace and our collection of high-quality reproductions that we used for training purposes. The reproduction Evangelines were so good they'd fooled experts before. That's why we kept them locked up almost as securely as the real pieces. Someone had switched them. Someone had taken the real necklace, left the reproduction in the vault, and then waited for me to unknowingly steal what I thought was the real piece. And I had played right into their hands. The security escort out of Meridian felt like a perp walk. 23 years old, 3 years into my dream job, and I was being marched out in disgrace while my colleagues whispered behind their hands. But worse than my humiliation was the knowledge that Marcus was sitting in a jail cell, branded a thief, because of me. At the police station, I found Marcus with a public defender, looking smaller and more frightened than I'd seen him since we were kids. Maya? He looked up as I entered the consultation room. They're saying I stole something worth over $1 million. They're talking about felony charges. I don't understand what's happening. I sat down heavily across from him. Marcus, I need to tell you something, and it's going to sound impossible. Over the next hour, I explained everything: the necklace, my job, the reproduction, the setup. Marcus listened with growing horror. So I'm being charged with stealing something that was already stolen? He asked finally. It looks that way. The public defender, a tired-looking woman named Jennifer Ross, shook her head. This is incredibly complex. Maya, you're essentially confessing to unknowing possession of stolen goods, but you're also claiming you were set up. Marcus, you're caught in the middle with no knowledge of any wrongdoing, but the prosecution isn't going to care about the nuances. They have Marcus in possession of $1 million necklace he can't account for. What are we looking at? I asked. For Marcus? If convicted, potentially 5 to 10 years, the value puts it in grand larceny territory. Marcus went pale. 10 years? That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at my dresser where the jewelry box had sat that morning. Everything felt surreal, like I was trapped in someone else's nightmare. But as the shock wore off, it was replaced by something else: anger. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone had planned to destroy my career and frame me for theft, and they'd been willing to let my innocent brother take the fall for it. I started making a list of everyone who had access to the authentication lab 3 weeks ago. It was a short list. Only 5 people, including myself, had the clearance and opportunity to make the switch. Janet Whitmore, my supervisor. But she'd been nothing but supportive of my career. Dr. Marcus Hoffman, the chief authenticator, a mentor figure who'd encouraged me to apply for the job in the first place. Rebecca Santos, a senior acquisition specialist. We'd always had a cordial relationship, though she'd made a few comments about my rapid advancement. Thomas Wright, the vault manager. Quiet, efficient, almost invisible. And David Chen, another junior specialist who'd been hired the same week I was. Over the next 3 days, while Marcus remained in custody and I waited for my own charges to be filed, I became a detective. I called in every favor, used every contact, and spent every waking moment investigating. What I found was a revelation. David Chen had been stealing from Meridian for over a year. Not big pieces, that would be noticed, but small items. Reproductions sold as originals to private collectors, authentication documents for pieces that didn't exist. He'd built an entire side business around it. But I'd been getting too close. My work on the insurance appraisals had been meticulous, and I'd been asking questions about discrepancies in the reproduction inventory. David realized I was going to expose him, so he'd framed me. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Swap the real Evangeline with the reproduction, wait for me to take what I thought was the real necklace home, then tip off security anonymously. I would be caught with stolen goods, discredited and prosecuted, while he continued his schemes undetected. He hadn't counted on me loaning the necklace to Marcus, but it worked out even better from his perspective. Now 2 people would be destroyed instead of 1. But David had made one mistake. He'd been sloppy with his digital footprint. I'd kept copies of all my work files on a personal drive, technically against company policy, but a habit that now proved invaluable. Cross-referencing David's authentication reports with auction records and insurance documents, I found a pattern of discrepancies going back 14 months. More importantly, I found evidence that David had accessed the authentication lab's security system the night before I took the necklace home. He'd disabled the motion sensors for a 2-hour window, ostensibly for routine maintenance, according to the logs he'd filed. But I needed more than circumstantial evidence. I needed proof that would not only clear Marcus and me, but ensure David faced consequences for what he'd done. That's when I decided to take a risk that could either save us or destroy any remaining chance we had. I called David. Maya, I heard about Marcus. I'm so sorry. This whole thing is just awful. His voice was perfectly calibrated, concerned, sympathetic, with just the right note of shock. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed him completely. David, I need help, I said, letting desperation creep into my voice. The police think I stole the necklace, but you know me. You know I would never do something like that. Of course not. Maya, you're one of the most honest people I know. I keep thinking about that last day in the authentication lab. You were there when I was preparing the insurance documents, right? Do you remember anything unusual? Anything that might help explain how this happened? There was a pause. I'm trying to remember. It was such a normal day. I know this sounds paranoid, but I keep wondering if someone set me up. I mean, what are the odds that I would unknowingly take a stolen necklace home the same week someone reported it missing? Maya, that's crazy talk. Who would do something like that? I don't know. Someone who wanted to get rid of me? Someone who saw me as a threat? Another pause, longer this time. Maya, you're under a lot of stress. Maybe you should focus on getting a good lawyer instead of spinning conspiracy theories. You're right, I said, injecting defeat into my voice. I'm just grasping at straws. Thanks for listening, David. I know we haven't always been close, but it means a lot to have someone in my corner. Of course, we're colleagues. We stick together. After I hung up, I played back the recorded conversation. Thank you, smartphone recording apps, and smiled grimly. David had made several critical mistakes. First, he'd claimed it was such a normal day, but according to his own filed reports, he'd performed unusual security maintenance that evening. If it was truly routine, he wouldn't have forgotten it. Second, when I'd mentioned someone wanting to get rid of me, he'd immediately jumped to conspiracy theories instead of the natural response, which would be to ask why anyone would want to harm me. Third, and most damning, he'd said, "We're colleagues," in present tense, even though I'd been suspended and was facing criminal charges. Either he was remarkably optimistic about my future, or he knew something about how this would all play out. But I needed more. I needed him to confess, or at least to provide enough evidence to create reasonable doubt for Marcus's case. So I took an even bigger risk. I broke into the Meridian building. Actually, broke in is too strong. I still had my key card. Security had been supposed to deactivate it, but had apparently forgotten in the chaos of the last few days. The building was nearly empty at 10 p.m. on a Friday, just a few security guards and the night cleaning crew. I made my way to the authentication lab and began searching David's workstation. If he'd been stealing for over a year, there would be evidence. Receipts, contacts, something. I found it in the last place I looked, taped under his desk drawer. A small notebook with names, dates, and dollar amounts. A record of every piece he'd sold, every authentication he'd falsified, every crime he'd committed. Including, on the very last page, a detailed plan for framing me. Phase 1. Switch real Evangeline with reproduction during insurance prep. Phase 2. Anonymous tip to security after Maya takes necklace home. Phase 3. Maya discredited and removed. Investigation ends. There was even a note about my predictable personality and how he'd counted on my bleeding heart tendencies if anything went wrong. As I photographed each page with my phone, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Just need to grab some files from my desk, someone was saying. David's voice. I had maybe 30 seconds before he reached the lab. I quickly returned the notebook to its hiding place, grabbed my photos, and looked around desperately for an escape route. The supply closet. I squeezed inside just as the lab door opened. Through the crack under the door, I could see David's shoes as he moved around the room. Then I heard him talking on the phone. No problems. The sister is running around playing detective, but she's not going to find anything. Because I'm not an amateur. Everything that could implicate me has been removed. What? No, that's still secure. I'm actually here to check on it now. I heard him moving toward his desk, then the sound of tape being pulled away from wood. Still here. Maya Patel is good at her job, but she's not good at this. Monday morning, the brother gets formally charged and this whole thing goes away. Then I can get back to business as usual. After he left, I waited another 10 minutes before emerging from the closet. My hands were shaking as I reviewed what I'd overheard, but I felt something I hadn't experienced in days. Hope. I had him. But I also realized that I was completely out of my depth. I needed help from someone who actually knew what they were doing. The next morning, I called Detective Morrison. Detective, this is Maya Patel. I know you probably think I'm guilty, but I need you to listen to me for 5 minutes. I have evidence that my brother and I were framed. There was a long silence. Ms. Patel, anything you say can be used against you. I understand. But a man is going to prison for something he didn't do, and the real thief is going to get away with it. Isn't that exactly the kind of thing you became a police officer to prevent? Another pause. You have 5 minutes. I told her everything. The investigation, the notebook, the recorded phone conversation, the overheard call. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Ms. Patel, what you've described involves multiple felonies on your part. Breaking and entering, recording conversations without consent. I know. But what about David Chen? What about justice for my brother? Send me everything you have. Photos, recordings, all of it. I can't promise anything, but send it all. Monday morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was Jennifer Ross, Marcus's public defender. Maya, I don't know what you did, but the charges against Marcus are being dropped. I sat up in bed. What? The police arrested David Chen this morning. Apparently, they found evidence of an extensive theft and fraud operation. The district attorney's office believes Marcus was an unwitting victim. And me? You're still facing charges for the break-in and the recordings, but given the circumstances, they're offering a plea deal. Community service, probation, no jail time. I closed my eyes and felt something I hadn't experienced in over a week, the absence of crushing weight on my chest. Jennifer, is Marcus okay? He's being released this afternoon. Maya, what you did was incredibly stupid and incredibly brave. That evening, Marcus and I sat in our childhood bedroom at our mom's house, eating takeout pizza and trying to process what had happened. I keep thinking about that dinner, Marcus said. Sarah and I at that fancy restaurant. I was so excited to give her the necklace, so proud of this romantic gesture. And then her friend takes one look at it and says, "Oh my God, that's the stolen necklace from the news." I'm so sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry I got you involved in this. He shook his head. You didn't know. But Maya, how did you know to investigate David? What made you suspect him? I thought about it. Honestly, it was something you said in jail. You asked how you could be charged with stealing something that was already stolen. It made me realize that someone had to have orchestrated the whole thing. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. And the break-in? Stupidest thing I've ever done. If Detective Morrison hadn't decided to investigate David based on my evidence, I would probably be in jail right now. But it worked. This time. Don't ever do anything that stupid, okay? Marcus laughed. The first time I'd heard him laugh since this nightmare began. I think I've learned my lesson about borrowed jewelry. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings, interviews, and slowly rebuilding our lives. David was sentenced to 8 years in prison for theft, fraud, and conspiracy. The total value of his crimes exceeded $2 million. I served 200 hours of community service and was placed on 2 years probation. Meridian decided not to pursue civil charges, and my suspension was lifted. though I was transferred to a different department. The company also implemented new security protocols to prevent similar incidents in the future. Marcus finished his degree and got a job with a nonprofit organization. He and Sarah are still together, though he's never given her jewelry again. 6 months after David's sentencing, I was having lunch with Detective Morrison. We'd become unlikely friends through the whole ordeal. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "The investigation, the break-in, all of it?" I thought about it. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that I had to break the law to prove my brother's innocence, but I don't regret fighting for him. Even though you could have gone to prison? Rachel, Marcus was facing 10 years for something he didn't do. David was going to destroy 2 lives to cover up his crimes. Sometimes the system needs help. She smiled. "Just promise me you'll call the police first next time." "There won't be a next time." "Maya, you're a good detective, but you're a terrible criminal. Stick to authentication." These days, I work in insurance and recovery for Meridian. It's less glamorous than acquisitions, but I've found I have a talent for investigation. When pieces go missing or when authentication seems questionable, I'm often the one called in to figure out what really happened. I think about that week often. The week when everything I thought I knew about my life turned out to be wrong, when my trust in people was shaken, and when I learned that sometimes doing the right thing requires doing the wrong thing first. But mostly, I think about Marcus, sitting across from me in that consultation room, scared and confused, and facing years in prison for my mistake. I think about the trust in his eyes when I promised him I would fix it, even though I had no idea how. The Evangeline necklace is back in Meridian's vault, secure behind multiple layers of protection and authentication. Sometimes, when I'm working late in the building, I go down to see it. It sits there, beautiful and timeless, innocent of all the chaos it caused. It's just a necklace after all. Platinum and diamonds and sapphires arranged by some long-dead craftsman into something beautiful. The value we assign to it, the meaning we give it, the lengths we'll go to possess or protect it, those are entirely human constructions. But human constructions have power. They can destroy lives or save them. They can bring out the worst in people, or inspire them to extraordinary acts of courage and love. I learned that sometimes the most expensive thing in the room isn't $1 million necklace. Sometimes it's trust. Sometimes it's family. Sometimes it's the truth. And sometimes those things are worth stealing for.